The Galactic Council chamber fell silent as Ambassador Zethkar's tentacles trembled against his translation device. His voice, usually smooth and diplomatic, cracked as he delivered the report that would change everything the civilized galaxy thought they knew about survival. "Honored council members," he began, his purple skin shifting to darker hues of distress. "I have returned from the Outer Rim with news that defies our understanding of what constitutes a habitable world." The assembled representatives from 47 different species leaned forward in their specially designed seats. Some floated in liquid-filled chambers, others perched on crystalline platforms that hummed with bioelectric energy. All of them shared one thing in common. They came from worlds that the galaxy considered normal. Safe, predictable council speaker Miraseth, a tall being with gossamer wings that reflected light like oil on water, gestured for silence. "Ambassador Zethkar, your preliminary reports mention discovering new worlds beyond the Barrier Nebula. Surely you bring news of expansion possibilities?" Zethkar's tentacles writhed more violently. "Speaker, what I found, what we all found, challenges every protocol we have for determining world classification. We discovered 17 worlds that should not support complex life. Worlds where the very air burns, where liquid falls from the sky with the force to shatter bones, where the ground itself moves and splits open to release molten rock." A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Vekthari representative, a crystalline being that communicated through harmonic vibrations, chimed in distress. "Surely these are dead worlds, Ambassador. Geological curiosities at best." "That is what we assumed," Zethkar replied, his voice growing quieter. "Our survey ships detected no signs of civilization on initial scans. But when we landed on the fourth world, a nightmare planet with crushing gravity, violent weather patterns, and an atmosphere that changes its chemical composition seasonally, our instruments detected something impossible." The chamber's environmental systems hummed louder as tension filled the space. "Many species present required carefully controlled atmospheric conditions just to survive. The idea of a world with changing air composition was beyond their comprehension." "What did you find?" Speaker Miraseth asked, though her voice suggested she wasn't certain she wanted to know the answer. Zethkar activated a holographic display above the council chamber. Images flickered to life. Vast structures that seemed to grow from the hostile landscape itself. Roads that carved through terrain that shifted and changed. And massive installations that appeared to harness the very forces that should have made the planet uninhabitable. "Infrastructure," he said simply, "but not just any infrastructure. Engineering that works with the planet's hostile nature instead of against it. Structures that bend with seismic activity instead of breaking. Atmospheric processors that adapt to chemical changes instead of trying to prevent them. And most disturbing of all, cities that thrive in conditions that would kill any of our species within minutes." The Colatan ambassador, whose species required temperatures just above freezing to survive, spoke through chattering mandibles. "Are you suggesting these worlds harbor intelligent life?" "Impossible. No civilization could develop under such conditions. Not only do they harbor intelligent life," Zethkar continued, "but these civilizations appear to be thriving. Our long-range biological scanners detected millions of life forms moving across the surface of each world we observed. Complex society structures, technological development, and most troubling of all, signs that they have been observing us." The chamber erupted in alarmed voices. Clicks, whistles, and harmonic frequencies. The very idea that unknown civilizations had been watching the Galactic Council sent waves of panic through species that had grown comfortable being the dominant powers in their region of space. Speaker Miraseth called for order, her wings flashing brilliant patterns of authority. "Ambassador, you're suggesting that 17 separate species have independently developed on worlds that our best scientists classify as uninhabitable?" "No, Speaker." Zethkar's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I'm suggesting something far more disturbing. Based on genetic analysis of biological samples we were able to collect remotely, and linguistic pattern analysis of their communications, we believe these 17 worlds are inhabited by the same species, a single race that has not only survived on 17 different death worlds, but has apparently chosen to live on them." The silence that followed was absolute. In a galaxy where most species required careful environmental controls just to visit other worlds, the idea of a race that actively chose to inhabit the most hostile planets imaginable was beyond comprehension. "This species," Zethkar continued, appears to have spread across worlds that we couldn't survive on even with our most advanced life support systems. Worlds where the gravity would crush our bones, where the weather would freeze or boil our fluids, where the very air would poison us. And they don't just survive there, they build cities, develop technology, and create art. The hive mind representative, speaking through 1,000 synchronized voices, asked the question that terrified everyone present. If they can survive on worlds that would kill us instantly, what kind of beings are they? And more importantly, what would our worlds be like to them? Zethkar's skin had gone almost black with distress. That honored council is exactly what we need to find out, because 3 days ago our long-range sensors detected ships leaving one of those death worlds, ships heading in our direction. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air of the council chamber. If beings who called death worlds home were coming to visit the civilized galaxy, what did that make the inhabitants of normal, safe worlds? What did that make them? For the first time in the Galactic Council's 1,000-year history, the representatives of 47 advanced civilizations sat in their chamber and wondered if they were the ones who might be considered weak and helpless by the newcomers. The age of fearing the Deathworlders was about to begin. Captain Elena Rodriguez adjusted her environmental suit one final time before stepping through the airlock of the exploration vessel Resilience. The pristine corridors of the Galactic Council's first contact station stretched before her, all smooth curves and soft lighting designed to accommodate dozens of different species' visual needs. After 3 months traveling from Earth through the Barrier Nebula, the artificial perfection felt strange under her boots. Atmospheric composition confirmed safe for human physiology, her suit's AI announced. Local gravity at 0.6 standard Earth gravity, temperature maintained at 22 degrees Celsius, humidity at 45%, Elena smiled grimly. The conditions were so carefully controlled that she could probably survive here without any equipment at all, a luxury most of the station's inhabitants clearly couldn't afford. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see other ships docked at the massive station, each one sealed and connected to specialized life support umbilicals. Captain Rodriguez? The voice came from a translation device mounted on a mobile platform. Behind it floated a being that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a flower, its translucent body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. I am Diplomatic Facilitator Kilandra. On behalf of the Galactic Council, welcome to Neutral Station Harmony. Thank you, Facilitator, Elena replied, noting how the being remained carefully enclosed in what appeared to be a mobile aquatic environment. I appreciate the Council agreeing to this meeting, especially given the circumstances of our discovery. Kilandra's pattern shifted to what Elena's cultural briefing identified as nervous uncertainty. Yes, the circumstances. Captain, if I may ask directly, is it true that your species inhabits worlds that would be classified as Class 12 hostile environments? Elena considered her answer carefully. The truth was that Earth would probably rate higher than Class 12 on the Galactic Council's hostility scale, but there was no point in terrifying their hosts before negotiations even began. Our homeworld does present certain challenges, yes, but we've learned to adapt. Adapt, Kilandra repeated, the translator struggling with concepts that had no equivalent in galactic standard languages. Captain, our preliminary surveys indicate your species lives on worlds where the atmospheric pressure alone would crush most council species. Worlds where the temperature variations would cause cellular breakdown in our physiology. How do you define adaptation? Elena gestured to her environmental suit. We use technology where necessary, but mostly we just live with the conditions we're given. My home city experiences temperature swings of 60 degrees Celsius throughout the year. We have storms that generate winds strong enough to level buildings. Sometimes the ground shakes so violently that entire landscapes change overnight. We've learned to build accordingly. The bioluminescent patterns on Kilandra's body flickered rapidly, what Elena was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of shocked silence. You live through seismic events that reshape landscapes? Voluntarily? Where else would we go? Elena asked, genuinely puzzled. Those are the conditions on our world. We make the best of them. As they moved through the station, Elena began to understand why their arrival had caused such panic among the council species. Every corridor was carefully climate-controlled. Every junction had atmospheric barriers to prevent contamination between sections designed for different species. The beings she glimpsed through viewports looked fragile, beautiful in their diversity, but adapted for worlds where comfort and stability were the norm. Facilitator, Elena said, as they entered a vast chamber where dozens of different environmental pods surrounded a central communication hub. May I ask about the security measures your species employ? I noticed quite a few armed vessels escorting us to the station. Kilandra's patterns turned a deep blue that Elena's briefing identified as embarrassment. Captain, you must understand our position. When our scouts reported ships emerging from regions of space we consider uninhabitable, carrying beings who live on worlds that would kill our people instantly, we had to consider the possibility that you represented a threat. Elena stopped walking. A threat? We came here to establish peaceful contact. But don't you see? Another voice joined the conversation as a new being approached. This one a tall, ethereal creature that seemed to be made of crystallized light. From our perspective, you are beings who thrive in conditions that would destroy us. Your technology must be incredibly advanced to allow survival in such hostile environments. Your physiology must be beyond our comprehension. To us, you appear to be invincible. Elena looked around the chamber at the dozens of species represented, each in their carefully maintained environmental pods, each clearly dependent on precise conditions to survive. A terrible realization began to form in her mind. You're afraid of us, she said quietly. Terrified would be more accurate, Kilandra admitted. Captain, we have built our civilization on worlds where life is predictable and safe. We have shaped our environments to meet our needs, controlled our climates, eliminated natural disasters. The idea of beings who not only survive but flourish in chaotic, hostile conditions challenges everything we understand about civilization and progress. Elena sat down heavily on a bench designed for humanoid physiology, clearly hastily installed for this meeting. Facilitator, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not advanced because we live on hostile worlds. We live on hostile worlds because that's where we evolved. We're not more technologically sophisticated than you. If anything, most of our technology is focused on just staying alive and comfortable. But the engineering required to build cities that survive seismic events, the crystalline being interjected. The materials science needed to create structures that withstand atmospheric variations. The biological resilience to survive exposure to hostile environments. These represent technological and evolutionary advantages we cannot comprehend. Elena realized she was seeing the situation from the wrong perspective. What humans considered normal adaptation to challenging conditions, these species viewed as impossible feats of engineering and biological superiority. What humanity saw as making the best of difficult circumstances, the Council saw as evidence of terrifying capabilities. You think we're dangerous because we're survivors, she said, understanding finally dawning. You think anyone tough enough to live on worlds like ours must be tough enough to conquer worlds like yours? The silence that followed confirmed her suspicions. Elena looked around the chamber at beings who represented the pinnacle of civilization in their region of space, and realized that from their perspective, humans must look like unstoppable forces of nature. Facilitator Kilandra, Elena said carefully, I think we need to have a very different conversation than either of us originally planned. Because if you're afraid of us and we're just trying to say hello, we have a serious communication problem to solve. The patterns on Kilandra's body shifted to colors that weren't in Elena's cultural briefing, emotions and concepts that human science hadn't yet cataloged. Captain Rodriguez, perhaps you could help us understand something. If your species is capable of thriving in conditions that would destroy ours, and if your technology is advanced enough to support civilization on Deathworlds, why did you come here? What do you want from us? Elena smiled, though she realized the expression might not translate well to beings who had never seen a human face. The same thing any species wants when they meet new neighbors, I imagine. To learn, to trade, to share knowledge, and maybe to make some friends along the way. The concept seemed to break something in the translators, which struggled to process the idea that the terrifying Deathworlders had come calling simply to be neighborly. Dr. Sarah Chen tried not to laugh as she watched the Galactic Council's most renowned xenobiologist, a centipede-like being called researcher Vekthul, examine her medical scan results with what could only be described as horrified fascination. The translation device clicked and whirred as it struggled to convert concepts that had no galactic standard equivalent. Dr. Chen, Vekthul's voice came through the translator with undertones of disbelief. According to these scans, your skeletal structure is designed to withstand impact forces that would liquefy most known species. Your cardiovascular system operates at pressure levels that would cause immediate organ failure in council physiology. And your neurological responses to what you term adrenaline suggest your species actually becomes more capable under stress conditions. Sarah nodded patiently from her position on the examination table, which had been hastily modified to accommodate human physiology. Around the medical bay, a dozen different species observed through protective barriers, their various forms of scientific equipment recording every detail of humanity's first formal biological assessment. That sounds about right, she confirmed. Though I should mention, I'm actually considered pretty average by human standards. I'm a research scientist, not a soldier or an athlete. If you want to see impressive human physiology, you should meet some of our Olympic competitors. The ripple of alarm that passed through the observation chamber was visible even across the species barriers. Vekthul's numerous limbs trembled as he processed this information. You're suggesting that your species has individuals who exceed these already impossible parameters? He asked. Well, yes, Sarah replied, then paused as she noticed the effect her words were having. Researcher Vekthul, can I ask what exactly is so concerning about these readings? From our perspective, this is just basic human biology. The researcher's body language conveyed what the translator identified as deep scientific distress. Dr. Chen, your bone density alone indicates an evolutionary history of surviving impacts that would shatter our strongest materials. Your muscle fiber composition suggests adaptation to gravitational forces beyond what most of our worlds produce. Your immune system shows evidence of resistance to toxins and pathogens that don't exist on any known habitable planet. Oh, that, Sarah said, understanding beginning to dawn. Yes, Earth does have a fairly robust microbial ecosystem, and our gravity is on the higher end of what most planets seem to support. But we adapted to that over millions of years. It's not like we chose those conditions. Dr. Zilmoth, a ethereal being that floated in a specialized atmospheric chamber, chimed in with harmonics that translated to scientific excitement mixed with terror. Dr. Chen, could you describe what your species considers a minor injury versus a serious injury? Sarah thought for a moment. Well, minor injuries would be things like cuts, bruises, simple bone fractures, minor burns, that sort of thing. Most people can keep functioning normally with minor injuries. Serious injuries would be compound fractures, organ damage, severe blood loss, major burns covering significant body area, or injuries that prevent normal function. The silence that followed was so complete that Sarah could hear the environmental systems cycling in each of the observation chambers. Did she say simple bone fractures or minor injuries? One of the observers whispered, loud enough for the translators to pick up. Her species continues normal function with broken bones. Another voice added. The translation filled with notes of disbelief. Researcher Vekthul's entire body had gone rigid. Dr. Chen, in my species, a single fractured appendage would require immediate emergency intervention and extensive recovery time. You're suggesting humans simply continue their activities with broken skeletal components? Well, it depends on which bone and how bad the break is, Sarah explained, beginning to realize how this conversation was being interpreted. But yes, people often work or walk or perform daily activities while their bones heal. We have this saying about walking it off when someone gets hurt. The medical bay's environmental system struggled to process the sudden increase in stress pheromones, alarm calls, and distress signals from the various species present. Dr. Zilmoth's harmonics reached frequencies that strained the translators. Your species has cultural concepts about ignoring significant physical damage? It's not ignoring it exactly, Sarah said, starting to feel like she might be making the situation worse. It's more like, well, stuff happens, right? People get hurt doing normal activities. You deal with it and move on. What's the alternative? The alternative, Vekthul said quietly, is what the rest of the galaxy does. We engineer our environments to prevent injury. We design our societies to eliminate risks. We've spent millennia creating worlds where accidental harm is virtually impossible. Sarah blinked, processing this information. But how do you explore? How do you discover new things? How do you push boundaries if you eliminate all risks? We don't, Dr. Zilmoth replied simply. We thought boundary pushing was impossible without massive loss of life. We assumed that exploration beyond safe parameters was a form of species suicide. The realization hit Sarah like a cold wave. You think we're insane. Not insane, Bechtel corrected gently. Incomprehensibly brave. Dr. Chen, your casual description of human behavior suggests a species that treats mortal danger as a minor inconvenience. You speak of broken bones the way we would speak of minor equipment malfunctions. You describe surviving in hostile conditions as normal adaptation. Sarah sat quietly for a moment, trying to see humanity through their eyes. Researcher, can I ask about your own experiences? Has your species ever faced natural disasters? Predators? Resource scarcity? Historically, yes, Bechtel admitted. But we solved those problems through technology and environmental control thousands of years ago. We've lived in stable, safe conditions for so long that we've lost the biological and cultural adaptations for handling danger. So when you see humans, who live with constant environmental challenges and treat physical hardship as normal, you see something impossible. We see beings who have retained and refined capabilities we abandoned as too costly. Dr. Zilmoth clarified. Your species represents an evolutionary path we cannot comprehend, becoming more capable through adversity rather than by eliminating adversity. Sarah finally understood the magnitude of the cultural gap they were trying to bridge. You've created paradise worlds and became specialists in comfort and safety. We stayed on a chaotic planet and became specialists in adaptation and survival. And now, Bechtel said, his voice carrying tones of wonder and worry, the survivors have developed space travel and come to meet the paradise dwellers. Dr. Chen, from our perspective, your species might as well be living gods. You thrive where we would perish. You treat as minor inconveniences what we would consider civilization-ending catastrophes. And you've somehow maintained scientific advancement, while living in conditions we would classify as perpetual emergency situations. Sarah looked around the medical bay at the dozens of beings studying her from behind protective barriers, all of them marveling at biology they considered impossible and casual attitudes toward danger they found incomprehensible. I think, she said carefully, we're going to need to spend a lot of time helping each other understand just how different our definitions of normal really are. The medical assessment continued, but everyone present now understood they weren't just studying alien biology. They were trying to comprehend a completely different philosophy of existence, one where strength came from embracing challenges rather than eliminating them. Ambassador Marcus Webb stood before the Galactic Council's emergency assembly, facing what appeared to be the largest gathering of species representatives in the organization's history. The massive chamber hummed with environmental systems working overtime to maintain dozens of different atmospheric requirements, while holographic displays showed real-time translations in hundreds of languages and communication methods. What struck Marcus most was the seating arrangement. Instead of the usual integrated layout, every species had positioned themselves behind protective barriers, with increased distance between their delegations and the human representatives. Even the most advanced species, those who had dominated galactic politics for millennia, watched the humans with visible wariness. Council Speaker Miraseth's wings displayed patterns that Marcus's cultural briefing identified as formal authority, mixed with barely controlled anxiety. Ambassador Webb, this assembly has convened to address the unprecedented situation your species' arrival has created. We have reviewed the reports from your medical examinations, your cultural exchanges, and your preliminary technology demonstrations. Marcus nodded respectfully. Speaker, I appreciate the Council taking time to understand humanity's perspective. I hope our openness has helped clarify any misconceptions about our intentions. Ambassador, interrupted the representative from the Hive Mind Collective, speaking through 1,000 synchronized voices. The information you have provided has not clarified misconceptions. It has revealed that our initial assessments were, if anything, conservative. The Chamber's translation system struggled with the complex emotional undertones as dozens of species voiced agreement through clicks, harmonics, bioluminescent displays, and electromagnetic pulses. Marcus felt the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. I sense there's been some kind of misunderstanding about the capabilities my team has demonstrated. Perhaps if you could specify your concerns. Speaker Miraseth activated a holographic display that showed footage from the previous day's demonstrations. Ambassador, yesterday your engineer, Ms. Patricia Santos, was asked to examine our most advanced construction materials. When informed that the testing chamber's safety protocols had malfunctioned, and that toxic atmospheric conditions made the area inaccessible, she simply walked into the chamber without life support. The atmospheric composition would have killed any council species within seconds, added the Vekthari representative, their crystalline form resonating with distressed harmonics. Ms. Santos worked in those conditions for 6 hours, emerged unharmed, and commented that the air quality reminded her of a city she had visited on your homeworld. Marcus winced. Patricia had mentioned the air in the testing chamber smelled like downtown Los Angeles on a smoggy day, but he hadn't realized the implications of her casual comment. I understand that might seem impressive, but humans do have some adaptation to atmospheric variations. Adaptation? The Colatan ambassador's mandibles chattered with what the translator indicated was incredulous disbelief. Ambassador, your medical specialist, Dr. Chen, demonstrated what she called basic first aid techniques that involved manually realigning bone fragments and continuing normal function. The procedure she showed us for treating what you termed minor cardiac events would be considered major surgical intervention by our standards. More concerning murmurs rippled through the assembly. Marcus was beginning to understand that humanity's attempts to be helpful and informative had inadvertently terrorized their hosts. Then there is the matter of your security chief, continued a floating entity that appeared to be made of controlled plasma. Commander Rodriguez was invited to observe a training exercise with our peacekeeping forces. When she offered to participate in the scenario, our instructors warned her that the simulation involved exposure to stress levels that might cause psychological damage to unprepared individuals. Marcus had a sinking feeling about where this was going. Commander Rodriguez not only participated in the simulation but improved her performance. As the stress levels increased, the plasma entity continued. When questioned about this phenomenon, she stated that humans often perform better under pressure, and that the simulation reminded her of what your species calls a typical Tuesday at work. The chamber erupted in alarmed chatter across dozens of different communication methods. Marcus raised his hands for attention. Honored council members, I think we need to address the fundamental misunderstanding at the heart of these concerns. Yes, humans have certain capabilities that may seem unusual from your perspective. But we're not trying to demonstrate superiority or intimidate anyone. These are simply the normal requirements for life on our world. But that is precisely what terrifies us, Speaker Miraseth replied, her wing patterns shifting to deep purples and blacks. Ambassador, your species treats as routine activities what we would classify as extreme survival scenarios. You speak casually about living through disasters that would end our civilizations. Your normal appears to be our impossible. Marcus looked around the chamber at hundreds of beings from species that had mastered interstellar travel, energy manipulation, and technologies beyond human comprehension. Yet all of them were looking at humanity with the kind of fear usually reserved for natural disasters or cosmic threats. I think I'm beginning to understand the problem, Marcus said slowly. You've built your civilizations around eliminating challenges and controlling environments. We've built ours around adapting to challenges and working within uncontrolled environments. To you, our normal existence looks like we're constantly surviving catastrophes. Are you not? Asked the hive mind representative. Ambassador, your planet's weather patterns alone would classify as ongoing natural disasters by our standards. Your geological activity would trigger planet-wide evacuation protocols in council space. Your biological ecosystem contains millions of organisms that would be classified as lethal hazards. Yet your species not only survives but has created art, literature, science, and philosophy while living under these conditions. Marcus realized they had reached the crux of the matter. You're not afraid of our technology or our military capabilities. You're afraid of what our existence implies about the universe. The silence that followed was profound. If beings like us can exist, Marcus continued, if intelligence can evolve and thrive under conditions you consider uninhabitable, then your safe, controlled worlds might not represent the pinnacle of civilization. They might just represent one very specialized approach to survival. Speaker Miraseth's wings flickered through patterns that had no translation. Ambassador, you're suggesting that our greatest achievements, the elimination of natural disasters, the control of planetary environments, the creation of safe spaces for life to flourish, might actually represent limitations? Not limitations, Marcus said carefully. Specializations. You've become incredibly advanced at creating stability and safety, We've become incredibly advanced at adapting to instability and danger. Both approaches have value. The chamber remained quiet as hundreds of the galaxy's most advanced minds processed this perspective. But Ambassador, the Vekthari representative chimed softly, if what you say is true, then what happens when our controlled environments fail? What happens when we face challenges we cannot engineer away? Marcus looked around the chamber and realized he was seeing the beginning of a fundamental shift in galactic civilization. These species had spent millennia perfecting safety and control, but in doing so, they had forgotten how to handle uncertainty and danger. That, Marcus said gently, is probably something we should figure out together. Because if there's one thing humans have learned from living on a chaotic planet, it's that unexpected challenges always find a way to appear, no matter how well you plan. The Galactic Council's greatest fear was becoming clear. They had created paradise, but they had forgotten how to survive outside of it, and now the survivors had come calling. The crisis began 3 months after humanity's first contact with the Galactic Council, and it started with something that should have been routine. A minor solar fluctuation in the Kepler 442 system, where the Zithmaran civilization had built their crown jewel. New Paradise City. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood in the emergency command center aboard the human vessel Resilience, watching holographic displays that showed the unfolding disaster. Beside her, Council Emergency Coordinator Velnath, a graceful, 6-limbed being whose people had been spacefaring for over 10,000 years, was struggling to maintain composure as his civilization's most advanced response systems proved inadequate. Commander Rodriguez. Velnath's translator conveyed tones of barely controlled panic. The solar activity has increased our planet's atmospheric radiation by 12%. Our environmental control systems are failing. We've never experienced fluctuations of this magnitude. Elena studied the readings, her expression grim but focused. To human eyes, the crisis looked manageable. Elevated radiation levels that would require precautions but not evacuation. To the Council species, it represented an existential threat beyond their ability to handle. How long do your people have before the radiation reaches dangerous levels? She asked. Our medical experts estimate 6 hours before widespread cellular damage begins, Velnath replied. Our evacuation ships can remove maybe 30% of the population in that time. The rest, he couldn't finish the sentence. Elena turned to her communications officer. Lieutenant Chen, patch me through to Admiral Santiago on the Darwin. Tell her we have a Code 7 humanitarian situation. Commander. Velnath's voice carried confusion along with desperation. What is a Code 7? We've shared all our emergency protocols with your people. This classification doesn't exist in our systems. Elena was already moving toward the equipment lockers, pulling on gear that looked impossibly primitive compared to the sophisticated technology surrounding them. Code 7 is what we call a disaster. That's not really a disaster. Serious enough to be dangerous but manageable with the right approach. Lieutenant, what's our radiation protection inventory? We have hazmat suits rated for solar flare activity, emergency medical supplies, and enough rad scrubber medication for about 50,000 people, came the reply. Velnath's body language conveyed shock. Commander, those supplies could save less than 2% of our population. Why would you carry such limited emergency resources? Because, Elena said, strapping on equipment that looked crude but functional, we're not planning to hide from the radiation. We're planning to work in it. The next few minutes revealed the full scope of the cultural gap that separated humanity from the Council species. While Velnath watched in growing amazement, Elena's team prepared for operations in conditions that would kill most galactic civilizations. Velnath, we need detailed schematics of your atmospheric processors, Elena said, her voice now coming through a helmet communicator. My engineering team thinks we can modify them to handle the radiation surge. But we'll need to work directly with the hardware. Commander, the radiation levels around the processors are already at lethal concentrations. Even our emergency maintenance robots are shutting down from the exposure. Elena paused in her preparations. Lethal to whom? The question hung in the air as Velnath processed its implications. You're suggesting that humans can survive radiation levels that destroy our technology? We're suggesting we can survive them long enough to fix the problem, Elena corrected. Humans have some experience with radiation exposure. It's not pleasant, but it's manageable for short periods with proper protection. What followed was perhaps the most dramatic demonstration of the philosophical differences between species that had shaped their environments and species that had been shaped by their environment. As Council evacuation ships struggled to remove a fraction of New Paradise City's population, human emergency teams deployed directly into the radiation-soaked infrastructure. Dr. Sarah Chen, now wearing gear that would have been considered suicide equipment by Council standards, worked alongside Zithmaran engineers who guided her remotely from shielded bunkers. Velnath, your atmospheric processors are beautiful pieces of engineering, but they're designed for perfect conditions. We need to install some redundancies and modify the control systems to handle variable inputs. Dr. Chen, Velnath's voice carried wonder and horror in equal measure. You're performing complex engineering tasks in radiation levels that would incapacitate our people in minutes. How is this possible? Practice, Sarah replied, installing a modification that looked like primitive metalwork compared to the sophisticated Zithmoran technology. Earth's environment includes natural radiation from cosmic rays, geological sources, and atmospheric interactions. We've learned to work around it. Captain Marcus Webb, coordinating the operation from the surface, was managing what amounted to a cultural revelation. Velnath, how do your people typically handle environmental emergencies? We evacuate, came the simple reply. When conditions become dangerous, we remove our population to safe areas and wait for conditions to return to normal. It's the only logical response to threats beyond our control. But what if conditions don't return to normal? Marcus asked. What if the threat is permanent or long-term? The silence that followed suggested this was a scenario the Council species had never seriously considered. Within 8 hours, human emergency teams had modified the atmospheric processors on New Paradise City to handle the solar radiation surge. The equipment looked like a fusion of advanced galactic technology, with crude human engineering, sophisticated, environmental controls reinforced with backup systems that could function even when primary systems failed. The modifications are holding, Dr. Chen reported, her voice carrying fatigue but satisfaction. Radiation levels in the city are dropping to safe parameters. Your people can return to their homes. Velnath watched the readings with something approaching disbelief. Commander Rodriguez, your people just accomplished in 8 hours what our best estimates suggested would take months of evacuation and planetary engineering. How? Elena removed her helmet, revealing a face flushed with radiation exposure but showing no signs of serious distress. We did what humans do. We adapted the situation to meet our needs instead of waiting for the situation to adapt to us. The broader implications of the rescue operation rippled through the Galactic Council over the following days. Species that had governed interstellar civilization for millennia were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Their mastery of technology and environment had come at the cost of resilience and adaptability. The humans didn't just save our people, Velnath reported to the Emergency Council Assembly. They demonstrated capabilities we didn't know were possible. They worked in conditions that disabled our most advanced equipment. They improvised solutions using principles we had never considered. Most troubling of all, they treated the entire crisis as routine. Speaker Miraseth's wing patterns reflected deep contemplation. Coordinator Velnath, are you suggesting that our response protocols are inadequate? I'm suggesting that our response protocols assume we can control or escape from dangerous situations, Velnath replied. The humans showed us a third option, staying and adapting until the situation becomes manageable. The revelation forced the Council to examine thousands of years of civilization-building philosophy. Every major species in galactic space had followed similar paths, developing technology to eliminate risks, engineering environments to prevent dangers, building societies around the principle that advanced civilizations should not have to endure hardship. Humanity represented a completely different evolutionary strategy, becoming stronger through exposure to hardship rather than by avoiding it. The question we must address, the hive mind representative observed, through their 1,000 synchronized voices, is what this means for our future development. If the humans are correct that adaptability is more valuable than control, then we may have spent millennia optimizing for the wrong parameters. Elena, attending the council session as part of the ongoing cultural exchange, offered a perspective that would reshape galactic thinking. Honored council members, I don't think either approach is wrong. Control and safety have allowed your civilizations to reach incredible heights of art, science, and philosophy. But adaptability and resilience provide different advantages, the ability to handle unexpected challenges and thrive in changing conditions. But Commander, the Vekthari representative chimed, your species has demonstrated that our greatest achievements, stable environments, controlled conditions, predictable safety, may actually represent vulnerabilities. If we cannot function outside our carefully maintained parameters, what happens when those parameters change? The question struck at the heart of the Council's deepest fears. Galactic civilization had become incredibly sophisticated but potentially fragile, dependent on maintaining perfect conditions for survival. Perhaps, Elena suggested, this is an opportunity for both our approaches to evolve. You could help us develop better technology and more efficient systems. We could help you develop better adaptability and crisis response capabilities. 1 year after first contact, the Galactic Council chambers looked dramatically different. Where once pristine environmental barriers had separated each species in carefully controlled isolation, now integrated workstations accommodated mixed teams of humans and Council species, working together on projects that would have been impossible for either group alone. Captain Elena Rodriguez, now bearing the title of Interspecies Emergency Response Coordinator, stood before a gathering that represented the largest joint session in galactic history. Beside her, Velnath wore modifications to his environmental suit that allowed him to work in conditions that would have been lethal to his species just months earlier. Not because he had changed, but because human engineers had developed adaptive technology that could protect Council species during crisis operations. Honored delegates, Elena began. Today marks the completion of our first year of joint operations, and I'm pleased to report that the partnership between humanity and the Council has exceeded even our most optimistic projections. The statistics displayed on the Chamber's holographic systems told a remarkable story. 18 different emergencies across Council space had been resolved using hybrid response teams. 7 previously uninhabitable worlds had been made accessible through combined human adaptability techniques and Council environmental technology. Most significantly, 3 Council species had successfully established colonies on worlds they had previously classified as impossible death worlds. Dr. Sarah Chen, now directing the Interspecies Biological Adaptation Program, presented findings that would have seemed like science fiction a year earlier. Through careful study of human physiological and cultural adaptation mechanisms, we've developed enhancement protocols that allow Council species to operate in previously hostile conditions. The Zithmoran colony on Kepler 442b has been thriving for 6 months in conditions that their homeworld would consider lethal. The Zithmoran representative, Velnath's cousin Kilnara, provided testimony that illustrated the transformation. 1 year ago, my people lived in terror of environmental variations. Today, Zithmoran engineers work alongside humans in radiation zones, storm systems, and seismically active regions. We haven't lost our preference for stable conditions, but we've gained the ability to thrive when stability isn't available. The changes went far beyond emergency response. Human approaches to problem-solving had begun influencing Council science and engineering in fundamental ways. Where Council methodology focused on preventing problems through precise control, human methodology emphasized developing robust solutions that could handle unexpected variables. Ambassador Marcus Webb presented the cultural exchange, findings that revealed how deeply the partnership was reshaping both civilizations. Human scientists working with Council researchers have achieved breakthrough developments in energy efficiency, environmental control, and technological integration. Meanwhile, Council philosophers and artists working with human cultural specialists have developed new forms of creative expression that incorporate themes of adaptation and resilience. Hivemind collectives, representatives spoke through harmonized voices that conveyed complex harmonics of satisfaction and anticipation. The integration has produced capabilities neither civilization could have achieved independently. Human adaptability combined with Council precision has opened possibilities we had not previously imagined. Speaker Miraseth's wing patterns reflected what had become a standard Council expression, cautious optimism mixed with continued amazement at human capabilities. Coordinator Rodriguez, the transformations you describe represent a fundamental shift in galactic civilization, but we must address the concerns raised by some member species about the pace and scope of these changes. Elena nodded, understanding the underlying tensions. Not all council species had embraced the partnership with equal enthusiasm. Some viewed human influence as a threat to millennia of carefully developed safety and stability. Speaker, we've always emphasized that adaptation to challenging conditions should be voluntary. No species is required to modify their preferred living conditions or adopt human methodologies. However, we do recommend that all civilizations develop some capacity to handle unexpected challenges. The wisdom of this approach had been demonstrated just 3 months earlier when the Crystalline Federation's home system experienced an unprecedented cosmic ray burst. Their traditional response, evacuating to prepared safe zones, proved inadequate when the safe zones themselves became compromised. Human-trained emergency teams had coordinated a response that saved billions of lives by adapting existing infrastructure to handle the crisis, rather than simply evacuating from it. Researcher Vec Thule, now co-director of the Combined Xenobiology Institute, presented findings that illustrated how the partnership was advancing scientific understanding for both civilizations. Human biological adaptation mechanisms have revealed cellular and genetic processes we had never observed. Simultaneously, council precision, medicine, and environmental control technology has allowed humans to survive and work in conditions beyond even their considerable natural capabilities. The presentation showed footage of human council teams working in the vacuum of space, in the crushing depths of gas giant atmospheres, and in the radioactive environments around stellar phenomena. The partnership had created capabilities that pushed the boundaries of what either species had thought possible for biological beings. Elena recognized that the session represented more than a progress report. It was a celebration of how fear could transform into cooperation when different approaches to survival were combined rather than competing. A year ago, many of you feared humanity because we represented unknown capabilities and an approach to existence that challenged your understanding of civilization, she said. Today, I hope you've seen that our different approaches to survival aren't incompatible, they're complementary. The chamber filled with the various forms of communication that indicated agreement and satisfaction across dozens of different species. But Elena knew the real measure of success wasn't in the statistics or the technological achievements. The real measure was in the Sithmoran children who played games that incorporated both careful planning and adaptive improvisation. It was in the human students who learned to appreciate the beauty of precisely controlled environments while retaining their ability to thrive in chaos. It was in the joint crews of ships that could handle both routine operations in safe space and emergency responses in cosmic disasters. Marcus Webb delivered the final assessment that would define humanity's ongoing role in galactic civilization. The partnership between humanity and the Council has demonstrated that survival strategies thought to be mutually exclusive can actually be mutually reinforcing. Safety and adaptability, control and resilience, precision and improvisation. These aren't opposing forces. They're different tools for different situations. As the session concluded, Velnath approached Elena with news that would mark the beginning of the partnership's next phase. Coordinator, our deep space sensors have detected signals from beyond the outer rim. Early analysis suggests we may have contact with civilizations that make even humanity's Deathworld origins look comfortable. Elena smiled, feeling the familiar rush of anticipation that came with new challenges. Around the chamber, council species that had once trembled at the thought of meeting Deathworld survivors now looked forward to the possibility of encountering even stranger forms of life. Well, Velnath, Elena replied, I guess we'll find out if a year of working together has prepared us for whatever else the universe has to offer. The galaxy had learned that survival came in many forms, and that the strongest civilizations weren't those that eliminated all challenges. They were those that could handle any challenge that came their way. The age of cooperation between the safety builders and the challenge thrivers was just beginning, and the universe had never been more full of possibilities. In the end, they hadn't feared the Deathworlders because they were dangerous. They had feared them because they proved that there were other ways to live, other ways to survive, and other ways to build civilizations that could last. Now, working together, they were ready to discover what other impossible things the universe might hold.